fashion houses are seeing on e-commerce. So Jaime, what do you think?
Also.
Yes, we hear you. No. I think we have some technical problems with Jaime. We will try to, while we try to fix them. Gavin, could you please give us your view on this?
Yes, Javier, thank you. Yes, I think that we are likely to see a continuing expansion of e-commerce. We've already seen something like a 25% rise in the amount of e-commerce during the crisis. I don't think that trend is going to go downwards. I think that people will be looking to capture the advantages of e-commerce, and particularly with luxury brands, it's going to be quite a challenge because there is that need to recreate that luxury experience that people go to the store to have when they're purchasing luxury goods. And there are really two, I think, from a legal point of view, coming at it from a legal point of view as a lawyer who represents clients with brands, there are going to be two key issues, I think, that this will lead people to focus on. One of which is the greater need to control resellers who will sell online, particularly attempts that we've already seen in court cases over many years of trying to prevent people from selling through particular marketplaces, for example, eBay, Amazon, those type of marketplaces that sell a whole mixture of goods, and the extent to which you can control that. And I'm thinking particularly here about competition law and the whole technical issue of legal issue of selective distribution. And it's going to be extremely important for people to look at this closely, to look hard and to think about whether selective distribution is actually appropriate for their products. It's going to be much easier for luxury brands, and although they might be behind the curve at the moment in terms of e-commerce because they're not used to selling in an e-retail environment, they're really sort of newcomers to e-commerce. I think that they are actually in a good position because competition law will look favorably upon them because there is a luxury brand that needs protecting, and that's going to be, you know, one of the key factors in their ability to limit the sort of marketplaces that people can sell to. So I think we're probably likely to see a lot more litigation, decisions coming out of the likes of the European Commission and other competition authorities in relation to selective distribution as challenges are made. Obviously, it's going to be easy for people to jump on that e-commerce bandwagon and try to sell particularly luxury goods where they might not have had the opportunity to do it before in bricks and mortar stores. So there's going to be much more competition and much more trying to keep people out of that market. It's going to be harder for non-luxury brands because you've then got the question, well, are these goods suitable for selective distribution in the first place? And it might automatically be anti-competitive to put in place restrictive arrangements like that. So there's certainly going to be a lot of work for lawyers to do in advising their clients around that. And the other issue is brand protection, not just looking at it from the point of view of acting for the brand, making sure that as they enter new markets with e-commerce, which is the beauty of e-commerce, of course, that you can reach distant markets much more easily, making sure that your brand is protected in those markets. What freedom do you have to operate in those new markets? And that's something that we're going to be coming on to talk about a bit later on. But looking at it from the other perspective, it's the brand infringers, the people who want to use your brand for their own commercial ends to try to gain an advantage in the market, maybe selling counterfeits, but not just selling counterfeits, utilizing people's brands in order to gain a competitive advantage online, to make their websites more attractive, to make them more easily searchable, findable online through Google searches. And we've already seen a whole raft of cases, a multitude of cases dealing with the use of trademarks in metadata of websites, as keywords in searches, in Google AdWords, sponsored ads, sponsored AdWords, and keywords that you buy so that your sponsored advertisement pops up on the screen when somebody types that search into the box. It's going to be really important for people to bear in mind what the limitations are in relation to use of other people's trademarks in the online environment. It's not the internet is not a sort of law-free zone. You've always got to bear in mind the rules of the game when playing online, particularly in relation to rules set out in the likes of the e-commerce directive, making sure that there isn't the opportunity for confusion, because if there is confusion in relation to the use of a trademark when you are not that brand owner, then there is a potential for trademark infringement. You have to bear in mind what the internet user is accustomed to seeing. Yes, they are quite observant usually and quite circumspect, and they are used to seeing advertisements which don't necessarily relate to the goods that they have searched for. But there are limitations to that. So I think that there is a lot of work for lawyers to come out of it, and I think there's also a lot of work for brands to do in trying to harness the advantages that come out of e-commerce to make sure that they're playing on the correct side of the law.
Yeah, that's without hesitation one of the most important challenges that fashion houses are dealing on e-commerce. I completely agree. Jaime, have you been able to fix it?
Do you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Thank God, fantastic. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to participate into this webinar, especially to you, Javier. It's an honor, and I hope you all have an interesting afternoon. I also would like to wish our attendees that they are all safe and sound, despite it has been a few terrible months that we have in the past. Concerning the topic that we're discussing, I couldn't agree more with Gavin, that it has pretty much said everything. From my point of view, it's obvious that e-com was going to be the future. For the luxury brand, it is very difficult to give the experience we normally give to our customers in the boutique itself, like all the work that we give behind, the craft, the smell, the quality of the products. So the strategy of Loewe obviously is to accelerate even more the e-com process that we were doing in the last years. So we are speeding up in this direction. We are having a huge amount of work right now with all the jurisdictions worldwide to comply with all legal requirements related to withdrawal rights, etc., etc., etc. And from a luxury perspective, obviously, we always have to give to the customers a bit more than what is expected from a normal or standard fashion brand. So from Loewe, we're working on a system giving, let's say, more rights that we normally give in such markets. For example, if in the European Union it's 14 days for returns, we would like to give 30 days, for example. If we want to be as fast as possible in the deliveries. That implies obviously a huge work concerning supply chain deliveries, etc. An outstanding after-sales service also is going on. I have to say that e-com is obviously, as you may presume, not as big as, for example, Zara, Mango, Inditex in general, etc. For Loewe, it's only, I would say, 10–50% of our sales, but we have to give much more visibility to our omni-channel business worldwide. I'm pretty sure that will imply a lot of legal issues that we will face in the future, and we actually are facing now. The Chinese market, for example, now we're facing in the US all the legislation concerning EDA legislation for handicapped people that we have to comply also with. It's a huge work, and it's very interesting, and it's a way of speeding up what we already all knew, but we would not expand it. We didn't think it was going to be so quick. So welcome to the new e-com world for the luxury brands also, not only the retail.
Yeah, so at least one of the very few questions, very good positive things that coronavirus might have seems to be e-commerce. And yeah, it sounds like a really challenging work for us, for lawyers, that we should be really looking closely. Thank you both. Another topic that I would like to address, it's about innovation. Brands are really struggling to capture the market that in the fast fashion can be more atomized, and there is more competition maybe, but there is also a lot of competition in the luxury sector, and innovation seems to be key for the future. You know, fashion, it's an industry that is as old as the world, as human beings. Since there are humans, there is fashion, or at least there are clothes, and then we can say this is fashion or not. But the question is, we are in the 21st century. We are in a digital world, as Jaime and Gavin were mentioning. What is the role exactly that the innovation is going to play? What do you think, Fabio?
Well, listen, Javier, we are facing, of course, a dramatically unprecedented situation. And it's a situation where nobody could really see when it will end and how it will end. According to the discussion that I had with a number of fashion clients, they are observing what is going on with great concern. And so I thought that in order to get some ideas of what one might see as the future, it was advisable to look at what three big consulting firms have come to some type of conclusions in talking to CEOs of many fashion companies. First of all, if we look at the figures are dramatically concerning, because according to these three big consulting firms that are basically McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and Bain and Company, the three of them see a reduction in the revenues in 2021 from 27 to 30% as far as concerns textiles, which is dramatic. But even if you look at the personal goods, so excluding textiles, but including perfumes, including accessories or whatever, they do expect a contraction from 35 to 39% in 2020, which is also a very dramatic situation, totally unprecedented. The result of this is that, unfortunately, we will see many companies, particularly small companies, with significant financial problems. Some of them will go bankrupt. some others, it is foreseen that 80% of the publicly listed company in fashion will have financial distress. And this, again, poses the issue of what are the legal consequences for this. So it's a corporate issue that, however, implies also communication to with the shareholders, warnings, etc., etc. Now, which are the factors in substance that influence this situation? First of all, one of the common ground, apparently, that came out as a result of the interviews to these 50 CEOs of different companies is that there is a need of strong intervention to stabilize the current core business. So not to abandon the core business, not to be taken by panic, but on the contrary, to stabilize the acquired position. And so, in order to do that, almost all of them came to the conclusion that to have some positive results that will probably come, according to some of them, in the next year, 2021, according to some others, to the year 2022, people should also take into consideration some particular attitude by the customers, by the buyer. There is, for instance, at present, a strong, let's define it in this way, a strong discount mindset. So basically, the customers are expecting the prices to be reduced and to have the possibility to acquire the fashion goods for lower prices. And in this, as we said, the e-commerce must play a significant role. The digital escalation, of course, is one of the trends that will have to strongly consider for the coming months and for the coming years. But so products that are fast to deliver and follow quick changes of attitude of people, also with the use of social channels. And this will imply also, as was said before, the increase of counterfeiting using social channels and social media. Innovation becomes imperative in this type of situation. There must be significant ways to try to attract the customers in order to mitigate these huge damages created by the present situation and to face some of the trends that some of these consulting companies see. For instance, they see as one of the main trends the raising of the Chinese middle class, the development and the coming into the stage of younger customers, and as we said, the use of digital channels. But sustainability and innovation become two words that we will hear a lot in the fashion world and the fashion business in the incoming months, because the fashion company will need to find ways to not only to follow this important concept, particularly as far as sustainability is concerned, but also to follow a trend that the customer is expecting from fashion, innovation and sustainability, as I said.
Yeah, I completely agree. Gavin, in this regard, when we speak about innovation, we already speak about, and as Fabio was mentioning, and also Jaime, you mentioned about e-commerce, new channels, but also we speak about new designs, but also about new technologies to be applied to clothes, intelligent clothing, new fabrics, etc. What is the role that you think it's going to play here? Of course, when we think about fashion houses, we all think about trademarks, we all think about designs, but what is the role that you think that another IP figures will play on the protection of innovation? And I'm thinking about patents, I'm thinking about know-how. What do you think?
Well, yes, that's a very good. Sorry, Fabio.
No, what I was about to say, but I will speak only for 1 minute. But when we talk about innovation, we do not only consider innovation in terms of style or in terms of marketing of goods, but also in terms of innovative ways to conceive the supply chain of the products, reducing timing, reducing prices, and also using material that are more sustainable and more eco-friendly.
So
Gavin,
here you have the challenge. The Fabio give you the challenge, Gavin, of speaking about know-how and the protection of this way of organizing. You know, it's the best introduction possible.
Well, that's what lawyers are there to solve, all of these sort of problems that crop up, the unexpected. Yeah, it's going to create some interesting issues for our clients and for us as lawyers, looking at not just new designs, as Fabio says, that people come up with, but new ways of creating designs. So the thing that springs to mind immediately is 3D printing. There are fashion designers who are producing now fashion articles through 3D printing. It's not the only industry that's doing it. I have a client who produces aspects of their furniture designs through 3D printing. So it creates an interesting way to design. You can create smooth, clean lines, for example. You don't have to have joins. You can produce cheaply and cost effectively, and it has all of the advantages of being able to be printed by the end user. So one innovation is, I will send you this file, you the customer, and you the customer will be able to print out this file, and lo and behold, you have this fantastic innovative design, which is really high quality. That obviously raises certain issues in itself. But in terms of legal issues, you've not only got design protection, copyright protection, are those rights even available? And because you're sending potentially designs electronically, digitally to your customer in another country, you've got to look beyond your national boundaries. So that's one challenge. You've also got the challenges of local jurisdictions and whether protection is available in those jurisdictions through traditional IP rights like designs, because there is often a requirement of novelty, i.e. the design cannot be disclosed, subject to certain grace periods. For example, in the EU, there is a 12-month grace period, but that's not necessarily the case in other countries. And the culture of protecting the shapes and the other design aspects of fashion articles is very different in different countries. So, for example, in the US, the way in which you protect a design is based upon the theory that goes behind the patent system, not looking at the aesthetic aspects of the design as we do in Europe, but looking at more of the technical, innovative aspects of the design. And patents is certainly something that is not unheard of in the field of fashion. There can be novel ways of creating aspects of an article of fashion. For example, I think of a clasp on a handbag could be an innovative design. If it's new, it hasn't been done before, and it's innovative. It represents a creative or inventive step in the process that's not obvious to somebody who is a designer of clasps. The same with zips, other fastening methods. But then the question is always, can the brand afford to obtain a patent? Patents are generally not cheap to obtain. You also need to undertake a certain amount of clearance searching to ensure that you have the freedom to apply for this patent, as well as the freedom to launch your innovative new design into the marketplace. I have a client I'm advising at the moment. It's not in fashion. He's a designer he's an interior designer, but also designs articles for interior decoration. And applying his mind to the COVID crisis, he has created a device to open a door with your shoe, with your foot, as opposed to touching it with your hand. It's not the first such design in the marketplace. He's aware of that. But one of the things that he's concerned about is infringing somebody else's patent. And there is, sure enough, a patent out there for a foot handle as opposed to a hand door handle, or a footlaw, maybe you should say. And so we're now looking at that to see whether he has the freedom to launch his products into the marketplace, not just in the UK, but in the rest of Europe, potentially in the US. But you also have to remember that IP rights are territorial, and there are only a certain number of international or pan-national systems which give rise to protection other than protection under treaties. So copyright being a typical example of an IP right which is protected pretty much worldwide through the Berne Convention. But other rights, like designs and patents, they're territorial rights, they're national rights. And there are some systems, like the International Design Registration System and the European Patent, for example, but not all countries are members of these systems. It's not necessarily very cheap or cost-effective to apply for these things. And if you're thinking about the potential economic crisis that will, if it has not already started, that will evolve from the COVID crisis, the question is, can clients afford to spend all of this money on these sort of things? And actually some people will say, well, it's cheaper for me to innovate, and I will simply spend time doing research and development, and I'll just keep moving my technology and my brand forwards, designing new products, designing interesting new types of product. Does that answer your question? Know-how. We haven't talked about know-how, so I'll talk about that as well. Protecting know-how is that there are really two ways in which you do it. One is that you don't disclose your know-how at all. But if you want to do business, you need to communicate with people. You need to pass over a certain amount of information. Otherwise, you're going to find it quite difficult, alone at sea trying to do business. So the best thing that you can do is think about putting in place a non-disclosure agreement or confidentiality agreement. There are, of course, legal measures to protect trade secrets. We now have the various laws in various European countries to protect trade secrets. But of course, they're only going to protect certain types of information. So first of all, it has to be secret. There has to be a commercial value to that information. Now, if we're talking about innovative new business methods, innovative new designs and methods of manufacture, there's likely to be a commercial value to those. But of course, the best remedy for protecting confidentiality is not to disclose the information at all. Coca-Cola, for example, have never disclosed their secret formula for Coca-Cola, and it remains unknown by anybody else to this day, and still extremely popular and not innovative. I think
here, of course, it would be, of course, the protection of know-how, and innovative by know-how. It's cheaper than a patent, of course, and also here the cooperation of all the structure, including from the design of this protection, from the legal department until the execution, from the last person involved in the chain. On the company, it's key, it's essential. One mistake and the protection can be vanished away. Of course, when we speak about innovation and fashion and protection, we need to speak about blockchain, and about this we will see after the video of Eric, which is I know well, and we will it will be addressed there. And if you have any question, you will be able to put. But I think that in that video, it's the first time that I understood what blockchain is and how it serves to protect. So I really think it's very interesting. So we leave it for the end. As Fabio was saying, sustainability goes by hand with innovation, and sustainability has been for the past 3 years, cutting edge topic on the fashion industry. So, Joanna, how do you think that this is going to change after the COVID-19? Do you think, as Fabio, who was very optimistic about this, or you think that there is going to be any kind of change on mentality now that fashion companies seem to have other, at least short-time priorities?
I am with Fabio, Javier. I am very positive about the future. I think that green has become the new black, as Tamsin Blanchard said a few years ago, and that is not going to change. And that is not going to change mainly because of consumers. Consumers are still very worried about the environment and the consequence of their attitude. And that is not going to change after the COVID-19 crisis. It will most likely increase their worries about the environment, as we have seen, all of us, how the lockdowns have positively affected the world. Furthermore, I have read a report called Weaving a Better Future, Rebuilding a More Sustainable Fashion Industry After COVID-19 by the Boston Consulting Group, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and HIG. And it highlights how sustainability in fashion is at risk, but will be necessary to rebuild its concept. It offers 4 actions that must be taken: protect critical access to survive the economic crisis, solve immediate inventory challenges, integrate sustainability throughout the business recovery strategies, and accelerate transparency. But other studies find that actually post-COVID-19 consumers will make purchases in part based on trust and purpose, and companies will be judged on how they acted during the crisis, as well as how they prioritize sustainability and transparency after the storm has passed. From a legal standpoint, I think there are 2 issues that must be addressed. In one hand, we have the Fashion Pact, proclaimed last year in the G7 summit in Biarritz. It comprises 32 companies carrying Adidas, Nike, Inditex Group, and they are 30% of the fashion production volume. It is true that the Fashion Pact is a non-binding set of principles of guidelines. It is absolutely clearly stated in the pact, but it can be invoked by green associations as well as competitors, because the Fashion Pact has had a very positive impact in brand image. So consumers are very aware of this. So if these companies are saying, we are in the Fashion Pact, we are doing this and that to help the environment, combating climate change, resorting to biodiversity, fighting ocean pollution, but in fact they are not, this can be considered misleading advertising. And both associations, competitors, consumers can use this against the companies who are claiming to be green when in fact they are not. And furthermore, there is another issue that I think in a sustainability point of view is very important as well, and that is regarding workers' rights and working conditions in countries that are known for having textile companies producing for several international well-known brands. It is true that the world has been looking at Bangladesh and Myanmar since the Rana Plaza disaster a few years back, but now they are paying attention to it again because the COVID-19 crisis has showed that these workers were not protected during the crisis. They didn't get paid, they didn't have government protection, and of course, they didn't have the right working conditions in order to protect themselves. So I think this is also something that from a legal standpoint, it's going to be very relevant in the next few years, and brands should start looking at it and try to pressure those factories in order to provide for better working conditions.
Yeah, it seems that sustainability is still going to be a relevant topic. What do you think?
Definitely, it's going to be a very hot topic still in both sides of the sustainability discussion, not only for the brands, also for the factories who are designing new ways of producing, greener ways of producing, but also for consumers.
Fabio, would you like to add something?
No, I think that what Joanna just said is perfectly right. I entirely share what she said. I must say that in terms of sustainability and using eco-friendly material, these were concepts that were also implemented and very much used even before the COVID crisis. And nowadays, the COVID crisis, in my view, accelerates all this, and sustainability become really a key concept for the future. All the consumers are now so much concerned about our planet. Some of them, rightly or wrongly, attribute the problem that we are facing on a worldwide basis also to the abuse of our planet. And as a consequence, I think that the fashion will have to follow this trend and try to address this type of ideas and this type of attitude by the consumers.
So we now have confirmed e-commerce, innovation, and sustainability as three of the pillars of the future after COVID-19. Now, I would like to address another completely different matter, which is the conquest of new markets. You know, many fashion houses are seeing that with the current situation, it's now the perfect timing to look for different markets that have never been appealing at first, maybe, but that maybe the 21st century would give opportunity for these markets to be in this decade appealing. So what do you think, Jaime?
Yes, it is a very good question. It's something that I am aware the top management of LLEWELLYN has been discussed about it. Well, our point of view is a bit more conservative. I would say we prefer to expand and to be more consistent in the existing markets that we are already in than in new markets such as Africa or South America. I would say we prefer to be even more recognized, more important, more consistent in the current market than a new experience abroad, with two exceptions. As you may know, for example, in Europe, Asia, etc., LLEWELLYN is well known, but in the US, we have a lack of visibility. That's why we opened our flagship in New York, Soho last year. So we would like to go in that direction in the US. I think US for LLEWELLYN is a must in the future, and we have to expand in that direction. One other key point that I was surprised to know, a colleague of mine told me 2 days ago, saying that the sales in China were surprisingly huge, that is to say, like nearly 60% versus last year. And the reason is that the Chinese tourists that used to go to Europe, that actually are not going to Europe, they're buying in China right now. So you don't know how the market is gonna expand and where. So the idea of LLEWELLYN, as I said, is to be more consistent in the current market than starting a new experience with let's say, the risk of the current situation, and we don't really know what's going to happen in the midterm ahead. So we are going to take a conservative strategy in the I would say couple of years.
Very
also,
yeah.
Yeah, I would also like to say, for luxury brands, for example, it's very difficult to start in the new country where you have no visibility. So you can go either with a very well-known partner with a background experience in such market, which is not always very easy, or you can go directly on retail, which obviously is an investment, and you do not see the figures in the first 2 years at least. So, well, I think it's timing for being a bit more conservative and expand where we are and do the numbers and the figures where we are and try to increase in such way than going in new markets where you do not know for sure how the things are going to happen. That's our point of view so far. It may change, obviously. The world is changing every day, so who knows?
I completely agree. A few years ago, I had the pleasure to counsel a company in a big fashion show that they make in La Habana. It was a very challenging project. We well know the Havana market. We have a lawyer specialized in Cuba, and amongst the problems that we face, the ones that you were saying, for example, cultural problems. People on the audience to be nice with the fashion house, they were bringing counterfeited goods, but just to be wearing the same stuff, and it was it was a complete mess, but it was very real fun, and it was very successful. It's very complicated or very important to know where you're going, and sometimes it's very complex, different legal framework, and you need a really good partner to go with. It's very difficult to go from greenfield and to start a completely new market for you. In this regard, Fabio has a great past. In addition to all what I said, he also was the former general counsel of Armani and of Benetton, if I'm not wrong. So Fabio, I know you have a lot of expertise in international projects. You've already told me sometimes some funny stories about this. What do you think are, in your experience, the most challenging things when you open a new market or when you explore a new market, as Jaime was saying, that it is sometimes very challenging? What were the problems that you saw in your experience?
Well, if I may make a comment in general about expansion in new markets, I'm afraid that this pandemic that we are facing, it's on a worldwide, all the world has been affected, and the consequence of it are also world consequences. So the decrease in spending capability by the consumer is something that does not only concern the US, Europe, or Asia, but it's unfortunately spread out all over the world. So there are no, in my view, no new markets that are exempt from this phenomenon. So taking that into account, I think that the strategy that Jaime has just been describing is a strategy that many, not to say all, the fashion companies will follow, that will be to consolidate their position where they presently are and to try to regain the markets that unavoidably they have been in a way decreased or lost. I see, talking about new markets, I see this concept more related to new type of products, and I would like to come back to innovation again, rather than new geographies or new territorial market. You're right, Javier. I've been the general counsel of Armani or Benetton, but I'm an old dinosaur, unfortunately. This challenge is completely different, I would say. This is not something that comes as a result of a particular or specific financial situation. Is a global pandemic disease, and the consequences are spread out proportionally all over the world. I don't know whether I answered your question, but basically the consolidation of the existing market is the strategy that we will see more and more. I appreciate what Jaime has just said about China. China, it's despite what happened, it's still a growing market. There are significant parts of the Chinese society that are growing in terms of spending capability. But again, this is not a change with respect to the pre-COVID situation.
Okay. Gavin, how do you see, what do you think are the main challenges? We see that companies are going to take a conservative approach regarding their markets, most likely. Others would like to try to expand, but as Jaime and Fabio was saying, must be risky because you don't know the market, but also the situation is unfortunately global. This is not affecting only a few countries, as it seemed at the beginning, that it may be a problem of China, then Italy, but then Spain. It just fell down like a domino with very few exceptions, like Portugal. We see Joanna in excellent shape. But Gavin, what do you think could be for those companies that want to take a completely different approach, in your experience, the challenges from a legal standpoint?
Well, I think one of the greatest challenges is going to be to understand what regulations have to be complied with. If you're launching into a new marketplace that's unfamiliar, not just regulations that apply to the sale of consumer products and complying with consumer protection laws, or complying with regulations that apply to a particular type of product, potentially, but what regulations each country has put in place for the sale of products into that country, particularly if we're looking at it from an e-commerce perspective. Selling at a distance, what do you do about customer returns of products? Not just how they are returned, but how long the consumer has to return the products. There are going to be all sorts of issues which businesses thinking about expanding are going to have to understand before they do it as a result of the crisis. I mean, I tend to agree with what Jaime and Fabio have said, that there is going to be less appetite to expand now, and people will probably want to focus on their stronger markets. But there will be others who take the opportunity, I think, to buck that trend and to try to move into new markets and try to capture them and be first there, which means that they're going to have to think in terms of protecting their brand, protecting the designs that they sell, whatever they are, whether it's clothing, whether it's handbags, whether it's sunglasses, whatever, and think about what protection is available there. Is there actually freedom to operate in that market? It's a long time ago now, but it was well publicized at the time that Apple was effectively held to ransom over the trademark iPad in China because someone else beat them to it for an electronic device, and it stopped them from using the trademark in China until they bought the trademark. So is there that freedom to move into that market and operate there in terms of intellectual property rights, as well as all the regulations that I've touched upon? And of course, in seeking protection in those countries, there will be all sorts of hurdles to understand, and it's important to make sure that you have good links with local lawyers in those countries who understand the customs and practices of that country. I have a number of clients that I've been helping to secure brand protection in China, and the culture is completely different. The approach to obtaining a trademark totally different in China to the approach that we take within Europe. Not least the way in which the China Trademarks Office will examine trademarks and the sort of objections that they can raise to the application for a trademark. So I have a case now where a client is applying for a mark, and the China Trademarks Office has raised an objection on the basis that it is descriptive, because it also happens to be the name of a city in a country that is unrelated to our client. It's also unrelated to China, and it is also not famously connected with my client's business sector. So it has no relation to the case in hand whatsoever. But because it happens to be the name of a city in a country that is not unknown, an objection has been raised, which would not be the case in Europe. So it's a completely different approach to things. And that's not saying that they're wrong in saying that. That's a different system. You just have to understand that these situations arise. And if you are looking to expand your brand into new markets, you have to be prepared to spend time investigating and to understand what the requirements are of the local market, potentially to invest more time in securing protection, because it's going to take longer and it's going to be more expensive because lawyers have more work to do.
Yeah. No,
you
it's,
also have to think about.
I completely. No, I say that I completely agree with you, and here is what you and Jaime said. It's very challenging and it's an unknown market for you, so you need a good partner, and maybe it's a commercial partner, but also you need a local legal partner. You know, it's essential to have a good lawyer whom you can trust, and that you know it's going to look for the most efficient solution for you to understand and to cope the differences, to understand your business and how to address your business in this market. So
on the issue of Javier, on the issue of linking with a local business partner, which Jaime mentioned earlier, well, that in itself raises other issues, because there are countries which regulate, which protect the local business partner. So you know, in the UK, it's European legislation, it's EU legislation, but in the UK we have commercial agents regulations. Other EU countries will have their own equivalents to protect commercial agents who have devoted time and energy and money into the relationship. But some countries also protect distributors in a similar way. So you know, that's another thing that you have to give thought to. And whereas in Europe we're accustomed to these sort of problems that can occur with agents, and we might advise our clients, well, you're better off with a distributor so that you don't fall foul of the commercial agents regulations. The position might be very different outside Europe, and that's just another thing that you need to understand.
Yeah, of course, the protection and the figures, it's very different all over the world. Yeah, I completely agree with what you three said. Another different topic that I would like to address with you, and Fabio already mentioned it, was about innovation. And also Fabio said we should address innovation also in the way we manage the company, in the way of looking for new solutions, new supply chains. So what do you think, Joanna, that would imply COVID-19 in the supply chain? Would this mean expanding the supply chain or shrinking it? What do you think? What have you observed in the fashion industry?
In my opinion, it's more likely that supply chains will be shortened or somehow rebuilt in another way. Because what I have seen in clients here in Portugal is that their companies had to stop working because they didn't get the raw materials to work. So more than not having a way of getting the product somewhere, they didn't get the raw material, the fabrics, whatever to work. So they are now starting to look at another way of getting raw materials closer, in a way they will not be harmed if there is another lockdown. So they are starting to look for new suppliers in other countries, closer countries, that would, in principle, make it easier for them to get the materials and work. And this was very discussed for very different standpoints. Also, in Portugal, we have a special layoff regime during the pandemic and still going on until the end of June. And one of the possibilities to get to that layoff was to explain how the shortage of supply chains affected your company, and if that made you stop working at all or only 50%. So it was something that was put on a spotlight in Portugal during the past months and is being discussed. So what I'm seeing is companies are starting to find alternative suppliers in other countries, and will maybe closer to headquarters or closer to shops to make sure that their business does not stop again. So if the brand decides to have secondary suppliers, will the main supplier somehow exclude his liability? Because if there is another lockdown, you have a secondary one and a secondary supplier, so you did not actually get harmed by his impossibility to comply with his obligations. Another interesting topic that I found regarding supply chains is the interpretation of force majeure clauses. I think in the near future and right now, we are starting to see a lot of litigation around force majeure clauses. I think that those clauses weren't the ones that people were paying the most attention to when drafting an agreement. So they wouldn't actually read it because no one ever thought that something like this would actually happen and prevent us from working. So what I see in clients is, oh, we have a force majeure clause where we have to use it. But then it isn't correctly drafted, or it doesn't expressly state pandemics. Either it's too general and it leaves a very large room for interpretation, or it is too narrow. So I think it's another topic that it's going to be highly discussed in the near future. But I think that what's important now for clients, companies, and brands to think is reanalyze their existing agreements, try to find out what is the interpretation of the force majeure clause under the law that is applicable to the agreement, because the interpretation of force majeure clauses is very different in every jurisdiction. And also try to analyze insurance agreements in force. Do they include pandemic? This is also a very interesting case that we are starting to work on. And carry out audits concerning health and safety at work policies related to virus control, ensure good policies are in place. And furthermore, which in my opinion is the most important thing, prepare for the draft new force majeure clauses and make sure that pandemics, diseases, epidemics are actually in a very straightforward way in the agreement.
Yeah, I completely agree. Nobody pay attention. Let's just keep it force majeure. This never happens, and then we all were. Well, that was completely a tsunami for everyone, you know. So the last topic that I would like to address with you, it's the key question about fashion shows and catwalks. You know, we had fashion weeks all over the world. Milano Fashion Week, Paris Fashion Week, Madrid Fashion Week, Barcelona Fashion Week, New York Fashion Week. We have fashion weeks all over the most relevant cities of the world. But of course, now with all the current situation, we see that the traveling is completely limited. We see we had a very atypical fashion week in Milano with the Armani show without public and with models having a distance we have never seen before. Jaime, what do you think is the future of fashion shows? Are we going to see, is the Armani model going to be the model? Are we going to see more fashion houses? We're going to see digital or 3D fashion shows? Sorry, what do you think?
Well, I think I am very optimistic in these points. obviously, because fashion shows for us are extremely important. It gives us huge visibility on social media, etc. It's where our designer, Jonathan Anderson, surprises us with his collections, sometimes surprise us a lot. But I don't think it's going to change in the future. Maybe temporary, we can see some fashion shows with less attendees or with more healthy measures, etc. But in the mid-long term, I don't think this will change too much. Obviously, and something that this crisis has taught me is that we have to be prepared for the unpredictable. We have to be, and we have to anticipate ourselves to any circumstances that it was foreseen to be impossible in the past. But I don't think, as I said, I don't think it will change too much, and fashion shows will remain as they are. But for example, some new situations that it's true that I'm facing is, for example, for the buying sessions with the wholesalers that we have. Before it was it was physically, you show them the product and they decided to buy it or not. Now it's going to be all digital for this new collection. Imagine the huge risk that we entail in terms of counterfeits. You are going to give them the design, the products, picture, etc. of a new collection that nobody has seen it before. So, as Gavin was saying before, you have to take some very important confidentiality measures in order to guarantee that your partner is not gonna let's say give this information to somebody that shouldn't have it. But I hope, and let's cross our fingers, that this is going to be something temporary, and hopefully it will stay as it is, and we all can go to Paris, Milano, Madrid, Barcelona, etc., and attend these lovely fashion shows, which we all love, and it's the funniest part of this business, in my opinion.
Yeah, it really is. And also, I think that you took a very innovative approach and with the digital presentation. But as you also mentioned, it's in addition to the complexity on confidentiality, it's also different, because for luxury brands, you always have to give more, and touching the product, seeing them, and having the opportunity to communicate with your partners is essential. So yeah, it's a completely new world, and let's see. Hopefully, as you mentioned, this is just transitory, it's just a transitional way, and we will. This is one of the things that should tend to disappear in contrast with the e-commerce, and we will go back to fashion shows. Joanna, what do you think about this? Do you think? Yeah.
Imagine a luxury brand without all the glamour that involves a fashion week and a fashion show. It's impossible to imagine.
Yeah, completely agree. What do you think, Joanna?
Although, if I may add to this, I think that innovation will be the key word also for fashion shows. And in fact, I don't know whether you have seen the interview from from Gucci and from the main stylist of Gucci, who about fashion shows said that there will be significant changes in the future. So we will see. I mean, nobody can predict exactly what will go on, but in my view, I think that there will be some changes. There will be some changes.
I have to say that I totally agree with Jaime. I think it would be a loss for the fashion industry, for the luxury industry, to stop having fashion shows. It would be a total change to even the idea of the fashion pyramid. On the top of the pyramid, we have haute couture. Will we stop having that? It's the end of fashion shows. But also, like Fabio said, Gucci has come out to say it's going seasonless. It will have collections twice a year instead of 5 shows a year for sustainability and COVID-19 reasons. And it's interesting because Gucci was the one who got on the news because of this, but the Council of Fashion Designers of America and the British Fashion Council have already advocated for a shortage or the end of fashion shows. From a legal standpoint, I think the focus will be on models' rights, because models' rights, as many other fashion industry workers' rights, have been put in the spotlight with COVID-19. And we have realized they are highly precarious workers. The legal issue here is, are they formal workers of the companies and of the fashion agencies, models agencies, or are they independent contractors? Models agencies say they are not formal workers, but they hold a high degree of control over both their careers and sometimes over their lives. And there has been in the past litigation and also known cases of models who were somehow harmed either by models agencies or companies because they did not have a work agreement in place, either if they are independent contractors or workers of those companies. A famous case is of Angie Sherbo for Vetmo. She took a picture in 2014 that was only for one lookbook, and in 2020 that is still one of the main images of Vetmo. It's that picture alone is still the profile picture of the company in Instagram. She received only $1,000 for that picture, and she didn't have an agreement. She didn't litigate on that, and she of course feels very harmed by the situation. So if fashion shows get reduced, one of the questions for the models who have exclusivity clauses or exclusivity agreements with certain brands, does this still make sense to be exclusive for a brand? Because if you look at the models' relationship, both with companies, brands, and models agencies, if you are not talking about top models who can do whatever they want, they have very good managers, they are well known, everyone wants to work with them, so it's easy for them to negotiate and impose their will on those agreements. The same is not true for not so well known models or younger models who just want to have an opportunity, a chance, and have the dream of working with international brands. So this is a very good example of how a relationship in an agreement is and can be very disproportionate from one side to the other. So reanalyzing agreements for models who already have them or putting them into place. In Portugal, service agreements, there is not an obligation to put them in writing, but it's of course necessary to do so if something like this happens and you want to protect your rights or what you think was promised to you in the negotiation of the agreement. So I think that's one of the main aspects. If this actually occurs, there's a reduction of fashion shows.
And can I just make a comment as well about some of the other legal issues that arise out of the whole question of fashion shows and whether they are physical, whether they're digital, which is the point we were talking about the novelty of designs earlier on. If you're seeking protection for your designs by designs, and there is a requirement of novelty, of course, launching your collection, the moment of launch is going to be when it is disclosed to the relevant public, to the trade, whoever is attending the fashion show. Now, depending upon the law of the country in which you're concerned, that could be a good or a bad thing. For example, if you're seeking design protection within the EU, there is a bit of controversy at the moment, and there has been for some time, about what exactly the disclosure requirements are to benefit from an EU design, and whether the design has to be disclosed to the public physically within the territory of the EU or not, or whether it must simply be known to the relevant trade sector within the EU at the time of its launch. So you can imagine that an international fashion show, which is attended, let's say it takes place in the US, but it's attended by people from the European market. The question is, does it become disclosed to those people at the time it's launched there? And there is an argument about whether that's sufficient or not. If you launch your new collections digitally, you can of course launch them simultaneously worldwide. And then you don't have a debate about where exactly this was. But of course, the other side of that coin is that you might want to keep it secret in certain jurisdictions and not release it there.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, well, it seems that we are all very optimistic about fashion shows. I don't know if this is also triggered or at least boosted by our love about fashion shows, you know.
Just a
So,
comment.
I think that we are a little bit biased here, and we are too. Anyway, so I think we cover all the main topics that we wanted to discuss. First of all, we saw that e-commerce and innovation are key for the future. E-commerce is going to stay, has been a very relevant tool for fashion houses during this crisis. But as we mentioned, as Jaime and Gavin were mentioning, this is not a trend. This is the consolidation of e-commerce. Have to see how it will evolve, but the omni-channel strategy is gonna be key for fashion houses. Innovation is only going to be another key to get out of this dramatic crisis. Players who are going to innovate not only in the designs, but also in the technology, but also on the new strategy, commercial strategy, as our panelists said, are going to be in a way better position to handle the crisis and to gather these new markets. We also discussed about sustainability, and although there were some doubts in the market saying, well, companies now are going to be more focused on selling instead of focus on sustainability and on the planet. This was very well addressed by Fabio and by Joanna, saying, making clear that this is not the point, it's the other way around. Sustainability is here to stay. We also speak about new markets and the strategy to focus on how to expand in these new markets. And here the conclusion was clear. This is a global crisis. It might be interesting to explore new markets, but we have to be very selective. And it seems the best strategy to consolidate your position in existing markets and then be selective on where you go and how you go. Of course, selecting, investigating about this new market, and also investigating for nice partners and relevant partners. Finally, we also addressed two final topics, which were the shrinking of the supply chain, where we discussed about flexibility and how we will pay more attention to contracts, which is something that all of us suffer, especially in-house counsel as Fabio and Jaime, that you have the marketing team saying, we have to sign this yesterday, not today, you sign it, do not review it, you know, and you have this sales pressure. But I think that the crisis is going to provide us with a different perspective about the relevance of having solid agreements. And finally, we address the topic of fashion shows and the relevance for fashion houses. And this is a thing that, unfortunately, COVID-19 has taken us away, but we all think that this is going to, our panelists posed in a very brilliant way that this is just temporary and that we are not going to see this situation forever, and it's going to revert soon, because it is very difficult to understand, for not saying impossible, it's a euphemism, to understand fashion without fashion shows, you know. So I would like to thank all the panelists for their brilliant interventions. It has been a very interesting debate. We have some questions from the audience, but as we have been talking for 1 hour long, I would like to see, Colette, if we can see DocuThird's video so that we can have a little bit of pause so that our panelists can drink water, breathe a little bit, you know.
Thank you, Javi. We will start the video in a few seconds. Here we go.
Blockchain and lawyer? What is blockchain? To put it simply, blockchain is a digital concept to store hash code of a date in a decentralized ledger that is impervious to hacking, immutable, and anonymous. Hash code A is put into blocks. So imagine blocks of digital data and are chained together. When a block of data is chained to other blocks, its data can never be changed again. It will be publicly available to anyone who wants to see it ever again, in exactly the way it was once added to the blockchain. Historically, the blockchain, created by a person or group of people known by the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. It's a mathematical and cryptography method created in 1979. Our platform receives files from any client all over the world. We send the hash code of the file into the Bitcoin blockchain. After 30 minutes to 3 hours, the process is done, and we provide you on demand 24/24 a blockchain certificate. DocuCert.io offers a secure platform in SaaS mode, means you need only a single browser to use it. We use a French company for hosting. This platform is branded with all your color templates, logo, and name. In minutes, you can open a client account. Your client can access with login and password in 2 clicks and upload any files, Office, PDF, zip, images, video, 3D, into the platform. The process is very easy, and after blockchain process, we will get a blockchain certificate from a French bailiff. As a lawyer, how you can handle blockchain for you and your client. Client and the selected employees will have a single account to manage your file registrations into your account. You can access online 24/7 your directory of files and retrieve your time-stamped registrations. You have a client in the fashion industry. He needs to protect creation and models against counterfeiters anywhere in the world. In a few minutes with our platform, he could be protected. You have a client in building construction business. He needs a proof at minute. He can use our free app, ZakonStat, iOS and Android, and register in seconds, documents to sign, pictures or videos with geolocation, and get blockchain certificate on demand. You have a client in advertising, publicity. Your client wishes to protect his work when a recommendation is made for a client company. He can protect it in seconds before the meeting. You have a client in science and research industry. Your client needs to begin the patent process, but it takes time. In the meantime, the patent will deliver is not under protection. He could upload any process of his future patent and give it a certain date. You have a client in musical and entertainment industry. They can protect in minutes lyrics, sound, music, videos, pictures, storyboard, script. You have a client in the education industry. They can protect in minutes lesson programs, university diplomas, thesis. As a lawyer, you need to register, sign, and give a certain date to any NDA, shareholder pact, special convention, or any document you want to give a certain date and infallibility. Where the blockchain is admitted as a legal proof in 2020, in continental China, 18 USA states including New York, California, Nevada, in Europe, Italy, Russia, Germany, Lithuania, and in Africa, Ghana. With only the blockchain certificate, you can file a suit to any company or people. We are convinced that in a few years, blockchain certificate will be admitted in most countries. Pending, we also provide you a very simple solution for other countries. You can ask for a report of a French bailiff by a simple click. Your client can be protected in 170 countries, including France, UK, India, Brazil, Mexico, Netherlands, Denmark, for 70 years. Berne Convention.
Well, sorry for we had some sound problems, but I think we could perfectly see and listen to the video. Eric, I don't know if you want to say something about your wonderful.
Yes, we talk about the new technology for protection all over the world. And I think the blockchain technology, because now it's recognized in China, and it's very simple by a simple certificate instead of make some copyright in China is very, very difficult to make it. Now China, since 12 and 18 in September, recognized blockchain as a legal proof for copyright. So it's very interesting because China, as you know, it's one of the countries who have the most counterfeiting companies in the world. And it's very interesting that now some kind of client now on a big luxury show, they use the blockchain, our blockchain certificates for a suit against people in China who make some counterfeiting action, and it's recognized on the internet tribunal in China, because in China now all internet disputes, it's with a judge over internet. So very easy to use. And also now in US, you have the same things for some states, even it's New York City, New York and California, for example. But also you have now in Italy since last year, blockchain is recognized as a legal proof. So we think because blockchain is developed very well all over the world, and because of the COVID right now, for example, it's very easy to protect your creation in a 1 or 2 click, and you can do anywhere in the world. So you don't have to go on the office to act for and to get your copyright. It's definitely by a simple internet browser like a Chrome, and you can do it in a minute.
It's a wonderful and very interesting tool that it's also very useful for the fashion industry, as Gavin was mentioning, also Jaime mentioning, when you disclose the products, you know about counterfeiting.
Yes, exactly.
If you have it in blockchain protected.
Yeah, for example, from 20 years, I'm a bailiff in France, okay? So, and I receive before in paper all the copyright before fashion week, for example. And now it's very easy for example, I work with one of the most famous brands, luxury brand. So now before they need to make pictures, they need to make a photography and to give me a CD or a USB key or to get by paper. Now it's 2 minutes. Even during the fashion show, if there is any creation, they can just take the pictures and upload into the platform at minutes, and they are protected before disclosure. So very, very easy, and they can do it anytime, anywhere.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I don't know if there are questions from the audience for the DocuCert or for the panelists. We only have one so far, so that is a sign that you were all very brilliant and there are no questions. So that's a good question, a good point. The question is from Ruben Acosta, who's the president of the Bankruptcy Commission, and of course the question is about bankruptcy. Ruben is asking if we think that, if any of you think that we will see, we already introduced this, but if we will see any fashion house, small or big, entering into winding up or bankruptcy proceedings, or any other similar, we could see, for example, restructuration or investments from capital or hedge funds. What do you think? In your opinion, Joanna, what do you think?
I think at least here in Portugal, the situation is not very positive in most, because Portugal is a hub for production of fashion garments, both for fast fashion or luxury brands. And the industry has been very severely affected by the COVID-19 crisis. So in that sense, I am not very, very positive about the future. I think that a few companies might get lost along the way, but it is probably still too soon to make a formal statement about how this is going to be.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that we will see movements in the market. Unfortunately, some players will disappear, most likely small players, but we will also see new players coming up with innovative ideas, but also consolidation of relevant partners. But we will also see some movements of capital funds. I really think so. It's a time where liquidity it's key, and this crisis, from what I speak with funds, get them in the midst of a situation where they had a lot of cash. You know, so these funds do have a lot of cash. Cash is one of the needs of all the companies worldwide now. So I think we will see some interesting alliances in this that may help avoiding bankruptcy or winding up situations.
Yes, because there are also many startup companies with interesting ideas for the fashion industry in a post-COVID-19 era. And so I think funds will be looking at them very closely as well. So it's going to be negative from one side, but very positive for other companies and ideas that are coming out.
Yep, I agree. Well, if there is no any other question, I would like to thank you all very much for your participation, to all the attendees. We were almost 90 attendees. And also, of course, thank you to all our speakers, to Gavin, to Joanna, to Jaime, and to Fabio, who had to leave for a meeting. You were really brilliant. It's a real pleasure to have you on board and to share your experience about the views of all that is so concerning for all of us who are devoted to the fashion industry, such as the future. After this crisis that we have been speaking out coronavirus day and night, in the breakfast, in lunch, in everything, it's coronavirus, and we are a little bit sad. Luckily, now football is coming back, so this is a new sign of that normality is coming back. So I think that this seminar, I'm very glad about this seminar because you were all magnificent, but also because we were very positive about this brilliant future that we have ahead. You know, like leaving behind the sadness of coronavirus, the worries that, of course, we have all suffered. We have suffered. Many of you, especially those living in the UK, Italy, Spain, and United States, we have lost close people, and it's a very sad situation. But our lives have changed. But we have to be positive about the future, and this is the message that I very much like that you conveyed in a very professional and optimistic way, but also being conscious about the difficulties of the time. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise and your views.
Thank you, Javier. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.